feel like I'm listening to like Young and the Restless every time I play that thing. Doesn't it feel the same way? Like one of those
No,
old school like soap operas that used to be on like CBS back in the day.
it's too upbeat.
Oh, okay. It needs to be a little bit more dramatic. I got it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are back here for episode number what episode is this? Number 12 of the Monday Night Movie Review Club. And here we are. It's Monday Night Football back, so I'm pretty sure that's going to really help our viewership numbers over the next few weeks. But until then, we are back with the same regulars that we've always had on here, Mr. Rick. Mr. Rick's Texican Cafe. How you doing tonight, Rick?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I just got back from Houston a few hours ago, so I got a lot of things out there that I did, and so I'm a little bit conscious. I
Yeah.
just woke up from a nice long nap.
Well, then somewhere in Washington, we have Mr. Roberto Mato. Let me ask you: do you care as much about the Seahawks game right now and Russell Wilson coming back to town than everyone else in your city does, or are you just kind of like, eh?
Well, I'm a big NFL fan, so just for the storyline alone, it's fantastic. And we want to see how good the Broncos are going to be with the new quarterback this year. And the Seahawks are supposed to be terrible, like a bottom 5 team. So it's kind of interesting to see them kind of punching above their weight right now. I just think the last time I checked, they're winning. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm just a big NFL fan, and that's the trick with the fall time is like fitting in all the football with like all the movies and like trying to have enough time to do anything else. So
Did you boo them? Did you boo Wilson when he ran out, like most of Seattle apparently did?
no, because I like watching football, even if it's not. I mean, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan specifically, but
Yeah.
so no, I don't care. I mean, Russell Wilson could do what he wants. I think he's outgrown that franchise, honestly.
Yeah, their starting quarterback is Geno Smith now. And I was like, how the hell is that guy still in the league?
Yeah.
Like, well, wasn't he like has he been around for like 10 years now? And has he been good? It's like never.
Always a
Feels
backup.
like, well, he's starting now because now there's no Russell Wilson, so I guess he's going to be their go-to guy. But
Yeah.
good luck with that one.
Yeah.
And speaking
They got
of
a tank, though.
yeah, exactly. And speaking of the Tennessee Titans, I see you guys got off to a good start yesterday. What was your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I can't even. So yeah, I can't comment. Because there's so many things that are just gnawing at me because they were up by 13. So then they let the Giants come back. Then they got the lead back. Then they basically gave it back to them. Didn't produce on offense in the second half, and just it was a mess. So week 2 is against the Bills next Monday night. So I'm sure that's going to go much better.
Yeah. I mean, the Giants, let's be honest, I think they've made the playoffs once since the last time they won a Super Bowl. So they've been kind of in the mud for a little bit now. And they got their first opening week win in like 6 years. Just goes to show you just how well that franchise has been doing. But I mean, hey, it's situations like that when you know you don't have a good team and you have a chance to win, you might as well just take it while you can. Because, I mean, it's probably going to be like one of their 5 wins on the season. So let them enjoy it while they got it.
Yeah, Week one in the NFL is always crazy. It's always wild, unpredictable. Teams aren't in condition yet, especially the last couple of years without preseason or meaningful preseason or whatever you want to call it. So it's it's to be expected, and like things will level out the rest of the year. We'll see. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you guys this because it's been a couple of weeks since we've done a new recent movie. Have you guys seen anything recently in theaters? Anything that's come out in the last couple of weeks, or have you just taken this time as a little bit of a break from the stretch that we're about to embark on for the next 3 weeks here?
There was nothing that I found that I wanted to go see that was new. So I just said, no point into spending my money. I've got to spend my money on other things. So no, I haven't gone to the theater in a while.
What about you, Rob?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's just been absolutely nothing. I mean, I near me, they were playing The Godfather Part 2 and Godfather Coda, the newest version of the third Godfather film in a local theater in Tacoma. And I was thinking about going, but it just didn't really line up. And it was like, it would have been Saturday, Sunday, and today. So it just didn't end up working out. But no, I mean, there just hasn't been much in the movie theaters to go check out. So, and then there's going to be these just a terrible litany of movies coming out in September, whether it's Don't Worry, Darling, or Bros, or whatever. It's just not a very good time at the movies. The Woman King, that's the third one, the trifecta of just terrible ideas. They just sound awful, so I'm not looking forward to it.
We're talking major Oscar winners for each of them. How dare you, sir?
I mean, Rob's joking, but first of all, let's talk about the movie that we'll be discussing in more detail next week, The Woman King. This is the one that's currently sitting on 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone is glamoring about how this is a love letter to strong Black women all around the world, and no one going to dare say anything negative about this film, because if they do, they are Islamophobe by their own definition. So this is going to be very, very interesting to see how they essentially tell a story about how they're literally Black African slave owners, because they were the other side of that world famous slave trade, but now they're going to be portrayed as the heroes. Why? Because they're Black women, and that's as far as we're going to discuss the historical relevance of this story whatsoever. So that movie's coming out. Then also coming out this week is Clerks 3. Now, obviously, I probably won't be able to see it till later on this week with our streaming schedule, because they're only doing like 7 p.m. Showings, and obviously that's not going to work for me. But then I'll talk about Kevin Smith's latest movie. I've heard very mixed things about it. I've heard some people saying that this is the worst movie that they've seen in quite some time. Other people are saying if you're fans of Jay and Silent Bob, you'll probably won't think too much of the film. But I guess we'll only know once those films actually come out. So you can look forward to those next week, because we'll be talking about at least The Woman King in very much detail. And then after that, we have Don't Worry, Darling. And then I think we end the month with Bros, which Osnot over here is not a very big fan of one Kevin Smith, to say the least. I won't agree or disagree. I'll just keep that comment on the screen there. Yeah, I thought you had something to say there, Rick, about Kevin Smith.
No, I've never seen any of the Clerks, so.
Oh,
I've only seen. I mean, no, I've seen both of them, but I saw the second one maybe like a few weeks ago when I was on the plane to Vegas. That was probably the last time I've actually seen it. But yeah, then I saw the second one a little bit before that one, and it didn't hold up at all. In my opinion, there was a couple of scenes that were pretty good, but just as a movie, it's just a kind of drag of to watch for the most part. But I wanted to ask you guys if anyone of you guys heard about the film called The Barbarian, or just Barbarian, the horror movie that came out not too long ago. Now, I ended up being somewhat interested in this film because I made the mistake of listening to one film critic, Sonny Bunch. You guys ever heard of this guy before?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think he's a fucking asshole. He blocked me a long time ago because I always criticized him from. So this goes all the way back to the Rebeller days. If you guys remember Rebeller, it was like Cinestate's website that they launched, or social. It was a website, and it was supposed to celebrate like the movies that like men used to love and celebrate, like like westerns and like car movies and just guy movies, and it just talked a lot about Fast and Furious and a lot of commercial garbage.
I think something happened to your mic there.
Yeah, you sound underwater.
Yeah, I think your mic went to your computer instead of your actual mic thing. So
but yeah, just
yeah. I'll give Rob a second to fix his audio.
Well, I have no opinion on Sonny Bunch. I mean, I've heard of him. I see some of his tweets, but I don't think I follow him. So I have no view, positive or negative. And just for the record, I've enjoyed all the Fast and Furious except the one where they go into outer space and
the last one.
Yeah, the last one. And was it Hobbs and Shaw was an abomination. And poor
was it really an abomination?
Yeah.
Following up the one where they spin Tyrese and Ludacris in a car and send them out to space. So
well, I think Hobbs and Shaw came out before that one.
Yeah.
And I still say that the next Fast and Furious better have Rita Moreno and Helen Mirren do a drag race. Otherwise, I'm just not interested.
Or as I've been saying for years now, since you've turned this into an absolute cartoon, just do Transformers versus Fast and Furious. They're both owned by the same company. Just do it. You don't want to see Dom ride Optimus Prime as they team up against Megatron.
That's a crossover we never knew we needed. But
Yeah.
what about Sunny? What do you have? What do you guys against? What do you have against Sunny? Why, or if you do, why do you take his advice?
Well, I don't have say a personal beef with Sonny, like some of our guys on our chat. You back there, Rob?
Okay, how do I sound?
Okay, now you sound
Awesome.
good.
Okay, good. Yeah, something
Okay.
went up wrong with my computer, so I'm good.
All right, you were in the middle of a rant about Sonny Bunch there for a second. So
Yeah.
you want to jump back into that one?
No, I mean it's just he headed up the website for Cinestate, which was a production company that made a lot of really good movies I liked.
Yeah.
Dragged Across Concrete, Brawl in Cell Block 99, Bone Tomahawk, just kind of like harkening back to the Grindhouse cut type of exploitation movies. And the website just never delivered. It always was covered commercial crap like the Fast and Furious movies. And so I just constantly criticized him for it. Just, and it was friendly, but yeah, he eventually just blocked me over it. So, and that's okay. It's just like, whatever. But you have those little Twitter feuds, but and from time to time I hear about something he said. So glad to hear he's still up to his old tricks.
Oh yeah. So he went out there and he made a tweet earlier this week about hyping up this film Barbarian, which is a film that I knew about, but it was one of those, it felt like hit and miss type films, and we have reviewed so many terrible films up to this point. I was like, look, I'd rather just review literally anything else, which is why I picked this 1986 film instead of this one. But essentially, a lot of people were comparing this to A House of a Thousand Corpses, like kind of in the vein of like that type of horror film. I found out right before I went to go see this movie that apparently one of the guys from Whitest Kids You Know actually written and directed this film. I didn't know that beforehand. So Zach, if you actually watched The Whitest Kids You Know when it was back in the day, he actually wrote and directed this film. So I was like, okay, so there's a little bit of interest here. That might be actually something good to this movie. I go watch it, and if you haven't seen the previews, you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the movie where this girl reserves an Airbnb at some little shack somewhere and finds out there's a guy that's already there. They find out that they've been double booked, so they decide to stay the night at this house. Later on, she ends up finding the secret room down in the basement, and come to find out there's a lot of horrors within the house that they didn't know about before. So I went there to go watch this film. I guess you can call this an impromptu review because this movie was not very good. It was one where about halfway in, you start thinking, okay, this is actually pretty decent. I mean, there's a lot of like competent like storytelling stuff. The guy knows at least how to build tension by like doing like neat little camera tricks and like trying to like setting up things visually and things of that nature. But when you really start thinking about the plot of the film, it gets extremely dumb as time goes on. So this is one of those movies where it's set in Detroit. So if you guys know Detroit, everything's been screwed up there. All the houses are abandoned. So she gets this Airbnb, and it's in this house, and there's a shot early on where you can't see like any of the houses, like all the lights are off, so it kind of looks kind of weird and eerie. Then she wakes up in the morning, walks outside, like half the homes are like burned to the ground. The other one clearly haven't been lived in since like 2008. This the entire block, right? I'm thinking to myself, why would you get an Airbnb in a house in a clearly abandoned, dangerous neighborhood? And somehow this person who's supposed to be smart did not do any kind of Google map search on the area that they were going to be staying in beforehand. Like, am I overthinking it, or is this just a point of really, really dumb storytelling from the jump?
A bargain's a bargain. A bargain's a bargain. She probably got it really cheap. But my question is, why would you want to go to Detroit in the first place? I mean,
Well,
what was in Detroit that she wanted to see?
So the excuse for her being there is that she was doing an interview for, I guess, a documentary film that she wanted to work on. So she had to go to Detroit. My question is, out of all the areas in Detroit to stay in, why did you pick that one? It's like, is Airbnbs really that much different from just a hotel you can stay into for like a couple of nights and then go back home like a normal person?
Yeah, I mean, I would have stayed in a hotel, especially in Detroit. I would have stayed in what would be like, I guess, a reasonable, safe part of Detroit. I mean, I've seen pictures of Detroit. It looks very hollowed out. I don't know why you would want to go to an Airbnb, but it reminds me of something that my mom used to say. She'd say, "Lo barato cuesta caro," which translates kind of into what's inexpensive is very costly.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So this film just falls apart the deeper you get into, especially the third act is absolutely ridiculous. So for the spoilers, for those of you guys who haven't seen the movie, and I've seen the box office result, not a lot of you guys are watching it, so I have no fear in spoiling it for you. So the whole premise is that there's a elderly serial killer who's living deep in the confines of his home, like deep in the underground, and he has this mutated incest baby that it has like superhuman strength for some reason. So it's like a 40-year-old like mutated woman who's like down there, and she's so I guess messed up in the head that she thinks that everyone that goes down there is her kids. So there's very like visually disturbing scenes. I can kind of understand where they were getting like the House of a Thousand Corpses thing with the film, but it gets dumber to the point where you ask yourself, okay, what's the dude's name? I want to make sure I get his name right. Justin Long. You guys have seen Justin Long in plenty of things. Maybe you remember Waiting, things of that nature. So he's the actor who owns the property, right? And he's in the middle of literally being Me Too. Like literally someone, actress, accused him of rape. So he's going back to Detroit in order to scrap up any money he can from this rental property. And then he ends up being stuck in this whole thing as well. At one point, it's just the girl and him in the movie, and they're trying to survive together. Now they get to a point towards the end where there's this scene where he's kind of like reflecting on like the mistakes that he's made, and he kind of gives like a pretty good speech to someone who you think is gonna like redeem themselves later in the movie, because he gives like this whole spiel about, you know, I don't know if I'm a good person or not. Maybe I'm a good person who made bad decision, or maybe I'm just a bad person. But it's something around the lines where it's like, okay, if he actually redeems himself towards the end of the movie, you can actually pull his character out of the muck. Literally 5 seconds later, the monster jumps out, and he decides that he's just going to completely chase her, run away from the girl that he's supposed to be surviving with. He's like, screw her, I'm out of here. They both end up on the top of this water tower in Detroit. And this is the ending of the film. I'm not exaggerating. He decides, we're trapped. There's nowhere to go. There's only one way for me to save myself. He grabs the girl that he's surviving with, throws her off the water tower. The monster jumps off the water tower to catch her. They both land. Somehow in the course of that, the girl ends up landing on the monster, which is how she survives, even though they both fell like 60 feet in the air. He goes down there. Turns out they're both still alive. He dies like almost immediately, and then she ends by killing the monster, right? I'm thinking to myself, okay, great. If you didn't want to redeem that guy, you could have ended this movie like 20 minutes ago, because the guy was literally trapped underground by himself, and like no one was coming to save him. She goes back into the house to save him, only for him to eventually fuck her over later on in the film. And I was like, by doing that, you wasted like 20, 25 minutes of this movie. There's like an hour and 45 minutes long. And all that to, I guess, forward some kind of narrative that I guess guys are bad. Is one of those dudes bad movie where even if you're like a good guy, quote unquote, you still end up dead in the film, which is just like, okay. And then that's it. The movie ends. And then people are saying that this was like some glorious movie that's get like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's like literally the more I thought about this film, like the dumber it got. So that's your number one movie of the weekend, ladies and gentlemen, Barbarian.
Well, I guess if you're going to pay someone even not as not as well known as Justin Long, you might as well get your money's worth and put him on screen as long as possible. But my question is, okay, so both of these women were, went off the tower. Didn't the fall kill? Wouldn't the fall have killed the monster? I mean, rest right away.
It should have, but like I said, they never exactly explained how this mutated baby got like superhuman like powers apparently, because I mean she can like literally like rip your head like in half just by like the strength of her like incest baby strength, and then like she can almost like survive like wounds, like she gets hit by a car at one point and survives. So it's like she's almost like a superhero. Like, I didn't know that rape incest gave you superpowers. That's a odd message to give for a film of this nature, but I don't know. The whole thing's just dumb. Like when I compare this to like a film like Don't Breathe, especially the first one that had a similar setup and then in the same like part of town, that movie is far superior than whatever the hell this shit was.
Yeah, I mean, I like Don't Breathe. I thought the sequel had issues, but I like that movie. This movie does not sound very good, and the trailer I've seen a few times because I've been going to the movies the last couple months pretty regularly, and they started playing this, and it's very weird because there's like this very soft ambient indie music that plays in the very beginning of the trailer. Like it's a meet cute between the two like people, and then it descends into like, if that movie, what is it, As Above, like the catacombs in Paris or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like that's kind of what it was reminiscent of to me. But yeah, it's just, you got to wonder why it's rated so high by critics if it's if it really does suck so much, because it's like, why are you giving it like points? But
well, all I can think of is because of the way that film criticism is going, we can prove this just by the way that The Woman King is being rated. My only guess is because the protagonist is a biracial woman, and that's probably why they rated it so high, because that's just how shallow our film critics have become in 2022. It's like they just see that, the main character is a woman, and there's a lot of progressive hint talking points in the film. So we'll give it a 5 out of 5, even though it shit sucks. So
yeah. And I mean, we all know how Rotten Tomatoes works. It's not necessarily that every critic is saying it's a 5 out of 5. It's that it's favorable just enough to be fresh, which is kind of like the whole marker for it is kind of ridiculous. It's more when critics kind of go against something, and it's like, okay, so was this really bad, or are you kind of out of touch? Especially when the audience is like a 75% or something like that.
Yeah, and then you also have to, because I mean, a lot of these, if you actually like check the Rotten Tomato reviews when you're reading them, a lot of those reviews won't actually like be like this positive as you think. Like there's been some guys that have had like 2.5 out of 5 like ratings, and like their byline isn't even like a positive review, but somehow it's in the fresh section. It's like, how did that happen? So there's definitely some foolishness going on with some of those numbers there when you look at Rotten Tomatoes and the way that they reviewed some of these movies. Counterpoint, it said, Spencer said they hate mixed race people speaking from experience. Maybe they're just starved for something. I mean, there's definitely two sides of that story, because I think that if you look at it from more of a woke perspective, they'll probably praise that. But I do agree that there are people out there that do have problems with interracial relationships. And spoiler alert, they're not exactly white men. So especially depending on which combination you're speaking of there. But yeah, that movie was just like nothing. Like I said, I went on the recommendation of someone who I thought, okay, well, I mean, if they're saying these good things about the film, maybe I'll check it out. And then I was like, no, I should just trust in my gut and stayed at home. So thanks, Sonny Bunch, you dick. So yeah, we're kind of in the mud here right now. Then let's look at the box office here for a second, because it's really just showing that we're kind of in the mud as far as releases go. So Barbarian was the number one film and only did 10.5 million, which is not very good. But as we've seen, that just hasn't been anything to really celebrate whatsoever as far as the films go. Now, this is a movie that I saw earlier this week. This number 2 movie, which I believe is called Brahmastra Part 1 Shiva, which is an Indian movie. And I saw this being promoted heavily. Like, it's in more theaters than I would expect for like an Indian release. I was like, wow, they're really seeming to be going all in on this movie. I wonder why. Then I find out, it's a Disney release movie. So Disney is literally bankrolling a Bollywood film and trying to present it as if somehow they have nothing to do with the film whatsoever, even though it's their own production company. So they tried to fool people, I guess. It didn't exactly work, because even with the added production and exposure for the film, it only made roughly about $4.5 million. Now, you can argue that it was only in about 800 movie theaters, but the same thing goes on there. Then we have Bullet Train at 3.3, Top Gun 3.1. I think it passed $700 million, so it's still making money. And then, of course, The Invitation earlier this week, 6.2. And then there was this weird movie called Life Mark, which I'm not sure if you guys heard of it. It's like a Christian movie.
Yes.
But for all the screenings that I showed, they only had like one screening like all day. Like they would only show it at like 7 p.m. like each night. But somehow it made like $2.7 million. So I don't know if that's a good thing, considering they only had one screening for the entire day and it still made $2 million, or it was kind of undersold based on that. But that's pretty much all your big releases coming up right now. So it's been kind of rough over the last few weeks for movie releases.
I find that movies that are called Christian movies or overtly Christian movies tend to be smaller, but sometimes their box office is much bigger than people expect.
Yeah.
And this one might actually be good because there's someone else that I follow who is very much on, very much disliking a lot of Christian movies, and I've just liked certain Christian movies, especially from the people who made this one. At least I think it was the Kendrick brothers. They he actually liked it, so it might be good. And of course, it has I think it has Kirk Cameron, who is the bête noir of a lot of film critics.
Yeah.
So if I find it in the theater, I might check it out this week. But again, it's not something I would rush out to see.
No. I mean, in all honesty, I'm probably more willing to probably see Clerks 3 than ever watch that movie again. So
Yeah.
just throwing that out. To answer Spencer's question, yes, I do know, and I know from very personal experience that's the case. And I'll just leave it at that for now. But we've talked a lot of things. Is there anything else movie-wise that you guys want to talk about? Because I didn't want to bring up too much things. Because tomorrow night for the Ballroom podcast, we're obviously going to be talking about the Little Mermaid controversy. We'll be talking about Brie Larson trying to squiggle her way back into the limelight, Jennifer Lawrence, and all the things that she said. So, was there anything else you guys wanted to bring up before we move on to our movie discussion here?
No, I can't think of anything. I mean, the only thing is when Rob was talking about seeing the Godfather trilogy or some of those movies, I thought about the same thing. I thought about maybe going to go see the Red Shoes in the theaters, but that's kind of a sign of how bad movies have been recently, where both of us would rather see older films that we know are pretty much established classics in re-release than see anything new. And also, Rob, I can't believe that someone would block you. You're like America's sweetheart. And every time you say something, every time you criticize something I say, I never take it personal. That's
To be fair, to be fair, I feel like no one's really blocked Rob in a while. I feel like you've gone on a little bit of a run here, where it's just not everyone in the entire internet's hating all over you. So
the box office Twitter account that you guys constantly retweet blocked me a couple of weeks over. I think I said something like, don't say retarded things. Like it was like we had an argument over because they were basically saying Nope was doing fine at the box office, and I was like, no, it's not. And I was proven right. I mean, this was weeks after they blocked me, but I ended up being right. And regardless of how I handled it, which is the whole point, I handle things in a very acerbic manner, which is very, rude and rough and, sort of, prickly around the edges. But it makes for an entertaining follow. There's that at least.
Yes, well, I mean, I've grown used to that. That's why whenever you say something that contradicts what I say, I just assume you're wrong, and I never take it personal. So yeah, you're. So it's just as my mom would say, that's part of your charming.
Okay, why do you care about the Queen of England dying? Can you please answer me that? Who cares?
She was the Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, not just the Queen of England.
Yeah.
Why do I care? Well, I guess because she's been around for so long, and I mean, it doesn't affect me, but I guess in this case, knowing that someone has lost their parent brings back how I lost mine not too long ago, and it's still it's still something that you think about. At least I do. So I'm a little bit sympathetic, regardless of their status or position. I always think about how rough it can be to lose your parent, no matter what age. So I have that kind of reaction. Okay. But that's one of my reasons. But yeah, I admire someone who works until they literally drop.
Okay. Well, I'd say this from the two groups that I heard giving the most shit about the Queen dying this weekend. One was Irish Twitter, and let's just say there's a lot of politics between Northern Ireland and regular Ireland and independence and all that things. Cars have been blown up over this, so there's a lot of heat and a lot of history between them. So even though I'm not endorsing it, I could kind of understand it from their perspective. Then the other one was Black Twitter, and from what I can guess from Black Twitter, their objection to the Queen was two issues. One, apparently there are still people out there simping for Meghan Markle, which I don't understand whatsoever of why she's become like this folk hero for a lot of people in that community. And the second one is that they seem to have blamed all of the world's colonialism on the Queen. So they're still like blaming her from like slavery or something like that, even though they're like Americans who are like born in like 1990, which is just weird to me in a lot of instances. But that seems to be the main objections to any support for the Queen. Then you just have like the conspiracy people that are like, her dad's probably a pedophile, so let's just not celebrate her.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with Irish Twitter, I mean, they have Belfast. I mean, that's what I thought. They have the Good Friday Accords. But I would tell both these Twitters the same thing that I was told when I complained that the furloughed staff was still very hurt and angry about the furlough. My director, you really need to just get over it.
Yeah. Doing it in a very condescending tone too. They really like that when you say that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because now we're going to have the Woman King. If I understand from what I've been reading, it was the British who were forcing the Dahomey to end the slave trade. So I don't know what they're talking about when they're saying that the Queen perpetuated colonialism. The British Empire ended under her watch, or ended under her father's watch. She was the first non-empress of India. So I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand is that she's white, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. So
that's probably why they worship Meghan Markle, because she has been, she's biracial, and she's an American divorcee who married into the House of Windsor. It's like Wallace Simpson ought to be laughing wherever she's at, thinking, now I'm the classy one.
Oh, I also forgot to mention that there's apparently people upset about Princess Diana back in the day too. So apparently there's still some leftover heat about Diana's death when it comes to the Queen. So
well, they've been showing a lot of the Queen. I've noticed when I got back to the hotel, they did show a lot of the Queen over and over. So I saw it like 3 times.
Yeah. So. Like I said, just from an outsider's perspective, I know a lot of British people, and I've seen that they've been pretty upset about it over the last few days or so. So I was just like, I'll just stay out of it for the most part. It's not even my situation to start a war for one way or another anyway. So it's like, yeah. I mean, especially when you think about the actual circumstances of Diana's death, it wasn't exactly great. Let's just put it that way. But you know what was great? The movie that we're about to review right now, Soul Man. So let's go ahead and get right into it. As a matter of fact, I think we'll go ahead and just play the trailer here because this is an old-ass trailer. I don't think anyone's going to claim it. So fuck it. Let's go for it.
By the way, New World Pictures, again. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, the third or fourth movie.
This is at least the third one that we've done. My favorite line from this entire movie is the line, "This is the Cosby decade. America loves black people."
Don't laugh because of the Cosby Show and because of the Jeffersons. My mom assumed all black people were rich.
Well, I mean, it's a better stereotype to have than the current one. So, I mean, I would have taken it if that was what everyone thought in 1980s.
Yes, that's positive racism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just like Asians being smart. It's like those are the stereotypes I would rather have rather than the other ones that we won't talk about here on this show. But yeah, so you guys pretty much saw the trailer for the film that we're talking about here. This is the very quote unquote controversial 1986 film Soul Man. So obviously, I think we'll start off with the controversy here before everyone talks about the film itself. Now, you just saw the entire premise of this movie is that you have a high school kid or going to college. He gets accepted into Harvard. He's thinking that, his role is made. The only problem is that his father is not giving him the money to go to Harvard, so he has to come up with that money by himself. And because he has no credit history, because he essentially got everything from his parents, he has no means of obtaining the $15,000 that he needs to go to Harvard in the first place. So he decides that he's going to pretend to be a black man in order to get a scholarship that'll allow him a free ride into Harvard. And then that's where we go on from there. So the first thing I wanted to talk about here was the controversy behind this film, because they were drawing comparisons to blackface. Now, when the film initially came out, I believe the NCAA actually boycotted the film, and they must have only read maybe the opening synopsis of this film, because one of their talking points was that if you watch the film, the scholarship that he gets into was, I guess, to help one black kid in Los Angeles to get into Harvard. And then he was saying in the movie that statistically, how many black kids are actually applying for Harvard? Maybe 4. So it's who am I really screwing over at the end of the day? That was the whole idea. And I guess they took exception to that, saying that the kind of downplaying that notion that there wouldn't be any black kids from Los Angeles that would be smart enough to get into Harvard, things of those nature. But let me ask you guys about the controversy here, because I want to ask you this after watching this movie. Did you think that he actually looked more Indian in the film than black? Because I knew they were going for black, but it was if you tried to pass it Indian, you'd probably sell it a little bit more than the black side. But what was your thoughts on just the ultra controversy of the blackface in this movie?
Well, I mean, he's wearing blackface. Obviously, he's But I mean, and I'm going to try to sound. I'm going to try to say this as clearly as I can without sounding like a complete racist asshole. But he doesn't have the features of a black person. He has the skin and he has the hair. But there are certain features that don't fill out, or that don't come to the surface or whatever. But he looks like a white guy, and that's the whole thing. Is that's why blackface is kind of silly anyway, because it's nobody buys it. It's a joke. It's almost a laughable, sort of contrived thing.
Well, I'm not sure. Calling it blackface seems a little strange, and I'm also trying to express myself the best I can. Although, being a member of an oppressed minority, I guess I have some kind of privilege here, because any criticism of me is obviously anti-Hispanic commentary. It wasn't strictly blackface. This is more of how Laurence Olivier, I was thinking, when he put on very dark makeup to try to, quote, be black in Othello. So I think the whole point was not trying to I don't think he was trying to ridicule. Blackface, as I understand it, is more to ridicule African Americans. This is not the case. He was trying to pass himself off as black. And then you also have, as you brought up, Meghan Markle. She is biracial. She is black. She embraces that. And if you were to ask people, maybe some people would say she's not black. Maybe people would say, oh, she's white, or she's Latin. I don't know. But I'm not sure it's strictly blackface. But at the same time, I kept wondering about, was that a wig? How did he get his hair like that? That's just that was more strange for me than the actual black makeup. And I figure it had to be the whole body, because he didn't apparently fit a certain stereotype when it came to was it Wendy? So
we'll get to her in a second. But I do want to bring up a point that Rob made here. So if you see this picture, this is a woman who's famously known for being a white woman who I guess turned her skin black in order to pretend to be a black person. Now, some people will call this transracial. If you don't believe that some people can just, change their race, then I don't know why you believe that some people can just change their gender. I'm just going to throw that out there first. But as we can see here, just from looking at her, it's I think it's myself, who in the world, even if you're just looking at this picture objectively, who in the world is going to believe that this is actually a black person, right? Which is kind of like the central problem with the premise of this movie. Is okay, I understand he's trying to be a black person, but he still looks like white. That's the point that like Rob was trying to make. So it's like who was falling for this like right out of the gate? It was like maybe he was shooting for Indian. He can buy it. He can just like throw in a little bit of an accent. Probably no one would question it. But like a full fledged black person with hair like that, it's like I don't know about that.
Well, this is what I was thinking. I made a note of this that excuse me, that this has kind of a similar mindset as, and again, I'm not comparing the two to Some Like It Hot, because there's no way anyone would believe that those two men in drag are really women. But the whole
Yeah.
comedy comes from the fact that everyone plays along as if this were realistic. Same thing with Soul Man. The comedy uh, comes from the fact that everyone's supposed to believe that that he's black. I mean, regardless of the logic of it, that's why you have to suspend some disbelief, even though it's clear that this is a man who is wearing makeup, probably a wig, or I don't know what he did with his hair. But that's the whole premise. You have to suspend disbelief and you have to accept the premise, even though it defies logic. Same with Some Like It Hot. It defies logic, but you have to roll with it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a story.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that, again, if the NAACP got upset about this, I also have to remember, I think they also got upset about a TV show, The Secret Diary of Desmond Pfeiffer, which thought was making fun of slavery. Without having seen it, without even knowing what it was about, they got very mad because, again, they just listened to the premise without actually looking at the movie itself. And again, I was expecting something far worse. I was expecting open ridicule. That's not what I got. I got some obviously dumb moments, but I didn't get that this was an attack on African Americans the way it was portrayed.
No, because he's the butt. Like he's the butt of the jokes. Like that's the whole like fun part of the movie. It's this kid who has no. He's truly ignorant. You know, he has no idea. So his view is, what is it? Like going up to the meeting wearing all militant outfit. You know, it's because that's all
Like a
he
Black
knows
Panther.
of black culture is a 1960s caricature. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Like, if you actually like watch the film, the film is really just like mocking racism and racial stereotypes like in society. So it's really just like essentially like it's what we like to call a satire of these type of things. Even though people don't exactly know what that word means anymore, especially when films present themselves to be satire, but they're not. But that's what the film was satirizing. It was satirizing racial relations like in America, the stereotypes that white people have about black people, that black people have about white people, and all the other things like in between. Now, one of the biggest loudmouth shocker, someone who did not enjoy this film, was director Spike Lee. Can you believe that Spike Lee didn't like this movie when it first came out? Is that shocking to anyone?
No,
No.
he's a very boring individual, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
So he said that the reason why he didn't like it, why he objected to it, because he felt that the film was a attack on affirmative action, and that was it. Then he even said that the girl in the movie, Ray Dawn Chong, gets her black card removed for even being a part of this movie. So I just wanted to throw this out here that this movie was written by a woman, just in case you didn't know that. Going into it, so I just want to say, if he's going to throw any blame on someone, it's not on the guys over here. But yeah, so clearly he took exception to it from the affirmative action standpoint. Now, obviously, there has been instances in the past of real life situations where people have pretended to be black in order to get certain scholarships. Now, look at Minna Kaley's brother, and you can see a perfect example of that, how that whole thing played out. But I mean, I think there is something to say about affirmative action in the first place, because the idea is that you're essentially taking a spot from someone who's probably more qualified because you're trying to fit a diversity quota. And affirmative action was pretty much one of your earliest examples of diversity quotas that you're seeing now with the whole diversity and inclusion initiatives all around the country. So what do you think about that criticism, just on Spike Lee criticism about it being an attack on affirmative action?
I think it's completely wrong, because this is not him getting into Harvard because people thought he was black. He was already admitted to Harvard, and they already figured he was white. You even have that scene where they have to white out the W when he arrives. It's not affirmative action. And then you also remember that the scholarship is geared specifically toward black students. So this is in no way connected to affirmative action. Spike Lee is wrong on this. It's not about affirmative action. This is not someone taking uh, a place in Harvard because they're supplanting someone else of a minority. He was already admitted into Harvard. It would have been about affirmative action if he had gotten into Harvard because he was saying he was black and taking the place of someone who was maybe white or Asian or Hispanic, what have you. But it's not the case. So this is not affirmative action. This is not an affirmative action issue, as far as I can see.
I mean, I think you could maybe argue it from the scholarship perspective of saying that he's taking a scholarship that would have gone to potentially. I still think it's bullshit because it's a movie, number one. Number two, it's like it has nothing. I mean, it just has nothing to do with like any real world consequence. Not to mention that I don't agree with affirmative action anyway, because it should just be the best student or the best candidate to be a student gets in. You know, I think that. I don't know. I feel like we should reach that point a long time ago, but you know, here we are.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and get into the premise here of this film. So C. Thomas Howell, who when I watched him in this film, all I can think of was a young Robert Downey Jr. I'm not sure if anybody else felt that watching, especially the earlier parts of the movie.
I
But
thought about Jim Carrey.
I can definitely see a little bit of Jim Carrey as well, but maybe it's just more recent because me and Rob just recently saw Tough Turf as well, so that's probably why I got a lot of similarities with him in this film. But like I said, we talked about the premise. It's a white guy trying to get into. He gets accepted into Harvard, but he has no way of paying for it because his parents cut him off. So he decides that he's going to apply for a black scholarship. And he's going to pass himself off as black by taking tanning pills and by taking the recommended dosage. That way he'll get an extra chance. That way he can just pass himself off to be a black man. So what did you guys kind of think of just the opening premise of this film and how it was presented? Was there any critiques or anything that you liked about the way the film set itself up?
I mean, it was fun. You know, it's a movie where it's like, oh, it's a messy bedroom, and like it opens up with him in bed with a girl, and his best friend busts in. So it's just like automatically it's getting your attention. It's silly. It doesn't take itself too seriously. And you know, like but just overall, I know we're talking about the beginning here, but overall, it's a decent movie. But compared to the stuff that's coming out today, it's so much better and just so much more watchable.
Well. You certainly don't stray much from like the 80s idea. You got to have the wacky best friend there who you're puzzled as to how he got into Harvard. And then you have the wild parties. And my question about the premise is the dad tells him that he basically took his tuition fund to buy a timeshare in Barbados. I'm going, isn't that like, or are you stealing? Because that fund was set up for him. It wasn't set up for you. So I would argue that the dad stole his money because the guy expected to use that money to go to Harvard. It's not like he was going in there without any kind of income or financial resources. So I thought that was a setup. So I wasn't quite sold on that idea because the dad's the one who stole the money. That's what I kept thinking. The dad stole the money.
Because he went to a therapist that told him that he should only worry about himself and not his kids. So he went and spent that money on a timeshare. Right? That's your kids.
Doesn't this like just remind you of all these Gen X stereotypes of like the greedy boomer parents stealing your opportunities and like just being like, we're sick of taking care of you. Like so much of the comedy in the early parts is like these parents are just like, we're sick of you taking and taking and taking, and we leave some for us, you know. So it's very much that stereotype.
And I would have been like, can you at least like pay for my first semester? Then like maybe I can figure out a way to like work my way in after the fact. It's like I'm leaving in like a week. Like you couldn't have brought this up sooner. Yeah. But I wanted to talk about something that Rob said, and it was really just like this movie versus the way that movies are made today. Because I think if this movie tried to come out today, they would focus way more on trying to hammer Howe's character rather than talk about the overall. Because when the movie was presented, it was supposed to be an anti-racist. I don't mean like anti-racist in the way that we say it today, but it's supposed to be a movie that, like I said, that mocks and satires like racism in America. That's the way that it was presented. But in a film, if it came out today, they would have been more focused on trying to slam and I guess almost like struggle session Mark's character in a sense, because towards like the end of the movie, we'll get to a little bit about this, but when the whole thing gets exposed and he tries to make amends, he goes up to the people who he wronged, he eventually finds a way to make it better. But there's some people who think that, well, that's not enough considering what you did, considering your crimes, quote unquote, it's not enough for a white guy to simply apologize for what he did and then move on, right? Because that's kind of the mentality, the way things were in the 1980s. But obviously, if we shifted today, things have changed a lot more. I look at a film that we saw not too long ago called Not Okay, and the whole concept of that film, where you had a girl, keep in mind, wasn't even taking advantage of her from a race-based perspective, but it was just the optics of a white girl taking advantage of a black girl, and that she has to essentially atone for the rest of her life, and nothing's ever going to be enough, even if she goes there and apologizes. So you can kind of just see it just from the direction, the way that this movie and the mindset was back then in the 1980s versus what we have today.
Yeah, it's problem solving. Like, the thing is, like, people look at it like a race thing, but it's like, no, he needs to figure out a way to pay for school. And it's funny because, like, as you were leading up to it, I was thinking about Not Okay and saying, like, if this movie was made today, it would be a lot like that. It would be, let's penalize and punish this person who's obviously, a terrible racist, and shame them endlessly.
Well, I don't think he was a racist. I think he was just stupid.
Right. No, I'm speaking.
Yes, but I mean, maybe now it would be perceived. I hadn't thought about the Not Okay perspective here, but I think people really didn't. Well, maybe now they would have focused more on I don't know, on how bad it was. The most I could think of is he would be probably charged with fraud. That would have been, I think, crime, but he probably would have been ostracized and shamed and beaten up on social media for all that. I mean, but you have to remember, what is this, 1986? There was no social media. I mean, this would have stayed pretty much within the confines of Harvard and the people immediately affected. It wouldn't have involved outsiders needing to comment about how awful this all was. And
because Twitter and CNN and all those other outlets didn't really exist back then. So
exactly.
Rachel Dolezal.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I had that in mind. I thought of that as well. That
sorry. So you're saying if the character of Mark was a real person, he'd probably be on like an episode of like Celebrity Big Brother somewhere down the line after all the fallout of his actions.
You got to commit to it, man. Otherwise,
Yep.
Just a Halloween party.
So really, when you look at this film, like kind of the central tone that it creates is like, you have a kid who's obviously just self-absorbed, who's only like worried about himself, but he puts himself in a position where he inadvertently puts himself in a position where he has to walk in the mile of a black man's shoes. So he starts noticing things about, how white people treat him differently because how they see him. He starts noticing a little prejudice thing. So when one of the earlier scenes in the film is like when they first go to their dormitory, and they go to the landlord, and obviously you have like the rich money guy played by what's this guy's name? Right, top of the name, Leslie Nielsen. So he talks to him, like he sees in like his daughter is like completely into him only because he's black, and that's like the running joke of the rest of the film, that she only wants to date non-white men throughout it. Then the guys look at him. You saw him in the scene here. It's like, you didn't tell me that your roommate was a black Negro. He's like, wait, he's a black Negro? Really? Like, I didn't know. It's like, I'm going to go there and have a chat with him right now. So he kind of like just takes like the piss of the whole thing. But then there's instances where he's sitting in like the cafeteria, and like white guys are making like black jokes around him. And it's like, he kind of lets like the first few go until he starts like really noticing that like, you guys are really only focusing on like the black jokes like here at this school. Then even he has like the instance, I thought it was pretty clever when he's driving around town being followed by the cop. And then the cop like finally like pulls him over, and he's like, "I'm not like some guy who like doesn't have my ID." Then he pulls out his ID. It's like, "Oh yeah, shit, I'm white on my ID." It's like, okay, so I don't have my ID on me, right? So there's a lot of like I said, very clever ways that they go about tackling prejudice in a way that it's not so just like right hammering like in your face, where it's like the film's like yelling at you at a sense of this is what you're doing, make it better. Like they find like comedic ways to make the same point and actually make the film enjoyable, which is something that I appreciate. What did you guys feel about kind of just the themes of prejudice within the movie?
Well,
I mean, sorry, Rick, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, okay. I mean, I just wanted to say this real quick. Like when he first shows himself to his best friend, and it takes him a while to notice, the visual gag of his friend's face, and then the stunt of falling off the tall boardwalk, or whatever, which is ridiculous. And it's one of those things like you just don't see that kind of stuff anymore. And I don't know. I miss it a little bit.
And then the immediate cut of like them just walking like he's soaked and
Right. So it's just stuff like that. It's just like, and it's very rooted in old comedy kind of style. So it's just nice to see that. And how the movie deals with prejudice is just, I think it's refreshing because it's basically a silly movie the first half, and the second half it's more like, oh, I have to like deal with the consequences of my choices, and I have to I've committed to this. I have to see what it's like to live in live in a black man's shoes, like you said. So I thought it was an interesting, contrast from one half to the other. And it actually made it engaging and worth watching till the end. Because a lot of movies have a good start and then kind of don't know where to go. So I felt like this one had a pretty good idea and saw it through.
Well, there was one montage that I don't think you mentioned, Jacob. It's when he goes to play basketball, and of course you have. And I was surprised that Ron Reagan Jr. was in there too. But again, you have that not only tackle that stereotype that black men by default are better at basketball than white men, and then you have Ron Reagan Jr. never getting his name right, always and is calling him always by variations of the names. So that's making fun of the white characters. It's not making fun of the black characters. I thought it was interesting. It reminded me of two things. Just curious. It reminded me of a book that was written, I think, in the '60s called Black Like Me, where I think someone else did the same thing. He didn't put makeup, but he got his skin to darken up to see what it was like in the early '60s to be black in their experience. And then you also had a movie. I don't know if either of you have heard of it. It won Best Picture, Gentleman's Agreement, back I think like 49 or 48, somewhere around there, where Gregory Peck is going to be this crusading reporter, and he's going to do this expose on anti-Semitism, and he's going to call it "I was a Jew for 6 months." So he was going to try to, he was going to say he was Jewish, and then he ends up writing the article "I was a Jew for 8 weeks." So I thought, boy, you couldn't even hack half a year of being Jewish. So because he needed to explore what it was like to be Jewish himself, he didn't bother asking any Jewish people what it was like, even though his best friend was Jewish. But you have that. Yeah, this is not something new. This whole premise, and as for how they handle the racism, again, they weren't making fun of black people. They were making fun of white people. They were making fun of the stereotypes that white people have about black people or black men being good at basketball. And they also touched on topics that I think were not touched on maybe as well. That whole police chase. I mean, the reason that he gave him the ticket was because he moved away. He moved into the wrong way in a 2-lane street to avoid hitting someone else, and that was the excuse. Oh, you changed lanes without signaling. Well, if he's not going to have time to signal, and then you also have him go into the jail, and he gets beaten up by a bunch of racist people. So these are things that were more dramatic, or maybe would have been in a drama as opposed to a comedy. You have it's a comedy because it's a silly premise, and because he's romancing Ray Don Chong. That's where the comedy comes from. But it did touch on things in maybe, I don't want to say more lighthearted manner, but in a less serious manner. especially when he's being followed by the cops. So he was feeling that anxiety that I figure many black people would feel. I mean, I always feel anxious whenever the police are behind me, but that's just regardless of my ethnicity. I always just feel anxious. I always think that they're chasing me, but that's something else.
I actually have gotten a ticket like that, by the way. It was one of those intersections where they don't have like an actual like turning lane, so it's just like or like turning like signals or anything like that. So I had a car come towards me that was like speeding and not like putting on his blinkers the right way. So I actually kind of like swerved to avoid hitting him because he was the one further out in the lane, but the cop only saw me swerve and then pulled me over it because he didn't see like the other car that caused it in the middle of the intersection. So yeah, I was like, yeah, I've been there before. It's not fun. But they gave me a ticket. I think I paid it, but yeah, it was not a good day for me. Just throwing it out there. So I want to talk about James Earl Jones in this film. He's playing the character of Professor Banks. So obviously they're in a criminal law class. So the concept here is that the character of Mark meets the character of Sarah. And Sarah, as we find out like later on, is like a single mom working her way through Harvard. She's spending like a lot of her time either studying or trying to take care of her kid. And this is our love interest in the story. And she eventually, like Mark, eventually falls in love with Sarah later on. We'll talk about that in a second. But the character of Professor Banks, like in this film, and the way that it's presented, you think that he was like really gonna like hammer Mark on like a lot of like the more racial aspects of being on Harvard and being in campus right now. But what I liked about it is that they kept a lot of that element like subtle with his character, because at first he's like really hard on Mark, right? And you think to yourself that he's just doing that just because he's a black kid. He's kind of hard on Sarah as well, but as you get on later on in the film, you realize that he's hard on them because there is an aspect of he wants them to succeed because they are the only two black students in the Harvard class. So it's like he wants them to succeed, not in the fact that he want to make it easier for them just because he's black. It's like, here, you have to understand that when you're actually in criminal law, if you're trying on being like a lawyer or whatever the case may be, it's like these are certain situations that you're going to have to put up with, because people in the real world aren't going to put up with your bullshit, right? Like there's a scene where Mark gets arrested right after the cop pulls him over. He comes in, it's like, where's your paper? He's like, well, I just spent the last 18 hours in jail. I didn't finish the paper. And it's like, well, if you're representing someone, the judge isn't going to care what your personal story is, with your case. You got to be there and be ready no matter what, right? So he's trying to teach them like these life lessons kind of the hard way, but the fact that he's taking more time to like try to teach like these students makes you understand that he does care about their success, and he wants them to like learn life lessons the way that we used to learn things back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where your parents would be a little bit more harder on you because they want you to learn these lessons now without learning them the hard way in the future when real life actually hits you. So what did you think of James Earl Jones in this film?
Well, I thought he was pretty tough on everyone. He was like the Harvard version of Professor Kingsfield in The Paper Chase, or actually he was probably softer. He wasn't as cruel.
A little bit.
But I think he was sympathetic in a way, because after Mark came down and he could obviously see that he had been beaten up, he was disheveled. He gives him his number and he says, next time you're arrested, call me. So I think he was sympathetic to what it was like to face prejudice, but he wasn't going to let them slide. And I think, again, the reason Mark picked that class was because he figured that having a black professor, he was going to be easier on the black students than he was going to be on the white students, and he was wrong. So again, it's another case of Mark's prejudice and Mark's idiocy getting in the way, and he was proven wrong. And besides, it's James Earl Jones who's just a master of being dignified and strong, except for Coming to America. That was just disgraceful. The sequel. I just saw it, so I thought I'd throw that in. That was sad.
Yeah, that recent one that they did for Amazon, that was absolute trash. So I do not recommend that shit whatsoever.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, you have Mark, who basically antagonizes him the first time they're in class together.
Right
And
on.
he just keeps talking shit, and it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. You're like, everybody's looking at it like, what are you doing? And so like that's the first part. And then James Earl Jones has a really fun arc in this movie where he's this almost taskmaster disciplinarian, where how he runs his class. And but then he he basically tells Mark, it's like, look, no one's going to make excuses for you in the real world. So if you're not ready for your client, you're letting them down as a lawyer. So James Earl Jones is a great actor. Early on, his eyes go a little crazy, and I thought that was a little like, I don't know, like, I'm sure it wasn't for comedic effect. He's supposed to be like just very intense, but I found it a very off-putting. But and I think he plays a pretty profound character in the arc of the plot. So
I will say this: did anyone else think that it was weird that you're watching a movie about college and like they're actually like teaching you like useful information? That you it's like, is it just like a contract? I guess college strayed so far away from what his intention was. They're like, here, your classroom full of students learning about criminal law, and it's like, oh, they're just teaching them like the basic things you should learn in order to be successful at life. It's like that's just weird. Anyone else was just taken out from that, or?
I don't know. I don't know if it was Hollywood just kind of like preaching like, hey, black community, know your rights, fuck the police, or whatever, but just like, but that's not like a fuck the police thing. That's just you should know your rights. Everybody should know your rights, So yeah, it's good, but I feel like it was also just kind of like, being a little lame and kowtowing a little bit. But yeah, it's good information. Everybody should know it. So yeah, it's a positive.
I'm probably very naive, but I would imagine that in a school you should learn about education. And again, I don't know why I had little flashbacks to the paper chase when they were in the class, because I did think that James Earl Jones could have easily played Professor Kingsfield if they had done that movie with him in it. And well, the last time I think I saw Harvard, I don't know why Harvard Law School is always portrayed. I mean, I think the last time I saw Harvard Law School or Harvard Law School class was Legally Blonde. So that's my point of reference.
Well, have
Harvard
you guys
Law.
seen? There's a movie called With Honors with Joe
I've heard of
Pesci and Brendan Fraser. It's actually pretty good. And actually, this movie reminded me quite a bit of it because they're at Harvard Law School again. Gore Vidal is the professor, not James Earl Jones, and it's kind of about similar stuff, but it's just like at law school. So yeah, I'd say it's worth checking out.
I've heard of it. I've not seen it.
Yeah.
All right, so one of the better scenes of this whole movie is that so Mark at one point, the girl who obviously likes him because she thinks that he's black, Whitney, who I believe wasn't it the same girl who was on The Office, who played Michael Scott's girlfriend at one point? I think it's Jen. Yeah,
yep,
Jen.
Jan.
I figured it was her. I had to go and confirm that. But so there's a scene where they're all sitting like at the dinner table, and it's like her mother, her father, obviously, and then like her little brother. And so he's like sitting at the table, and it's like every single person at the table has like a different view of like how they see him like as a person. So it's like the mother has like some kind of like romantic like kind of angle with the film where he thinks that she's like the strong man who's going to have her way with her, right? So you see like where the daughter gets it from. Then of course you have like the son who listens to like a lot of black music, so he's sitting there, he almost looking at him like Prince. So it's like he's doing like this whole like Prince montage on there. And then of course the father, who doesn't trust him at all, just sees him as like this 70s pimp who's like just sitting there like eating watermelon and wearing like these funky suits. So you kind of just see how the way that it's portrayed, how all these characters portray him just because of his race, just by showing up there, which I actually thought was pretty funny and pretty clever in the context of this film. What did you guys think about that, or if you guys remember that whole scene?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I remember it, and I thought it was well done because all of them have this this idea of what the potential relationship is. I mean, this is not Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where he's
Yeah.
he's a noble character. They all have these awful ideas about what it is to be a black man and how it's again, it's making fun of them. He's not they're not making fun of black people. They're not making fun of the of him per se. They're
Yeah.
making fun of their perception. The film is making fun of their perceptions of
Exactly.
these white people's perceptions of a black man, and it's always awful stereotypes. The the prince, which I thought was a little creepy, the way he kind of sexualized the guitar and was swinging it. The dad, I guess he saw a lot of black exploitation films because I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
anyone dresses like that. And of course, the daughter's are pregnant, so obviously, and he's very abusive to her.
Yeah.
And then the mother is like, is thinking that he wants her sexually because I've had every now I finally get a white woman. It's just
And she was into it too. So
yeah. So oh my gosh. So again, it's satirizing their perspective, the
Yeah.
white character's perspective on him. It's not making fun of him, of the black when they think he's all when they think he's black.
I mean, it
Yes.
reminds. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, it reminds me of Farce. The guy's coming to dinner. He knows he's a fraud. We know he's a fraud, but everybody else is just sort of like willing to, not pay attention to the point of being accepting and not progressive, but just tolerant of the situation. And so it's just kind of a joke on these people. But yeah, it's not making fun of black people. It's making fun of like the white people who are just like so completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah, and one thing about this film is like like I said, compare this to like films of today. It's like it's not even really like attacking like all white people. Like, it really isn't. It's just attacking essentially the prejudice and racism that exists in our society. But they don't do it in a sense that where every white person in the film is just a bad guy. Like they clearly don't portray it as that at all. It's like they show that there are good white people out there. There are people out there who aren't necessarily like bad or evil, but just have like misconceptions about like other races and things of that nature. But that's the way that it's presented in the film versus if it was trying to present it in a way today, they would just like go full on like white people bad, just like how a lot of these radicalists talk in like colleges and shit like that. Like that's the point that they would hammer on when the film wasn't truly about that at all. But it just goes to show you a little bit of difference in filmmaking from now and then. I wanted to ask you guys essentially, what did you think about the romantic angle of this film, which is obviously the relationship between Mark and Sarah, and what did you really think about Sarah as a character throughout the movie? Because Sarah is like the opposite of Mark's character, which she is. She's a hardworking black woman in a college, but she's a single mother, so she has more added obstacles thrown at her way. But she's not any less capable than Mark is, especially when it comes to like study and her work and things of that nature. So, what did you kind of think of their dynamic and Sarah as a character in the film? Go ahead, Rob.
No, she's fine. Listen,
just one second.
I know
I
the movie is set up. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was literally just gonna say I think Rick has gotten the hint that keeps jumping over you, so he was just like waiting for you to speak, but then
I tend to go after Rob, so I'm just used to that. I think this is the first time where I actually go first. So I'm exercising my Hispanic privilege on you, Rob. Well, I actually liked her portrayal. It's a nice positive portrayal, and I'm a little sympathetic because my mom was in a similar situation. She would sometimes just have to take me to work, like Sarah did with her kid. I think at one point she took him to the cafeteria where she worked at. And I did the same thing. So it's nice to see that, she was smart, capable, hardworking. That's a positive portrayal. And she was the mostly sensible one. I think she was exceptionally tolerant toward Mark, especially given that he would not meet up with her. And I don't know if he ever told her, "Oh, I didn't meet up with you because I felt I needed to have sex with Whitney." because it was going to be easy. But she was a good character. But again, she needed to suspend some disbelief in the idea that he could possibly be black. But she was very forgiving a lot of times. Like when he showed up at the Black Student Law Association dressed in
Mhm.
that outfit, and when he stood her up, I think twice.
Yeah.
But I think eventually she saw him, even though she thought it was black. Even though she thought he was black, she just figured he was actually a good guy, and she was happy when she learned. No, get spoiler here. When she learned that he took the scholarship, she wasn't angry at him. She wasn't angry. She was actually happy for him because she said, "You know what? You know, I'm glad it went to you." Even though he knew that he basically took it from her, she was happy for him. So I like that.
Well, we've jumped over Rob enough on the show tonight. So Rob, go ahead. What do you think of Sarah's
I mean,
We love you, Rob. We love you, Rob.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to, say it's a cop out because she's like a plot device, because
Yeah.
but look, I think it's well done relatively, but it's like she exists and he exists to sort of bridge the gap for whatever cultural differences there are between being white, being black in this limited movie universe, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I think that in real life, we need people that are willing to be patient and willing to give people like a second look instead of just being like, oh, well, they said something to piss me off, so fuck them or whatever, And so, it's made about race here, but it's just like have this character that's willing to be a bit patient, bridge the gap, and then hopefully, there's progress made. And that's really that's something to sort of like celebrate, hopefully, between people. But like, yeah, it's not in a dumb like this weird victim fucking culture that exists today between like racial topics. It's about like understanding, hey, we're both human beings, we both want the same thing, and trying to see each other that way.
And yeah, I'm glad you brought up that aspect about her not being a victim. She's not. She doesn't see herself as a victim. She sees herself as someone who's going to work hard, who's going to provide for her son, who is pleased that she's able to go to Harvard. And even though it's a struggle, and even though she has to juggle a lot, study, work, and raising her kids, she has that desire and she has that motivation, and she's not a victim. Not once does she ever, as far as I remember, not once does she ever say, "Woe is me," or, the system is against me, or I'm oppressed. She always says, I will work hard to achieve this goal. And she also has a supportive family, which is a nice thing. Which, contrary to what, compare that with Mark, who does not have a supportive family, who has a family that cut him off. Here,
Hmm.
I believe it's probably her grandparents because they look older. They're actually on on her side and saying, what, we're proud of you and we're proud of Mark as well. So I like that. She's not. That's a positive. She's not a victim. She never sees herself as a victim. So we gotta we got at least I admire that from her, and I like the fact that she's doing all this in a way for her son. She's going to work hard so that he can do well as for herself. So those are good qualities to have.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I wanted to talk about that when you were talking. If you go towards the ending of the movie, so there's a scene right before he reveals himself to be, who he truly is, which is a white guy, and there's a scene where what's his friend's name? I want to make sure that I get his name right here. Was it Gordon?
Gordon, yes.
Gordon.
Yeah,
Okay.
we call him Gordo.
Or you have this comedic scene here where Gordon is in the classroom and he's going through like his old like lawyer like shtick and whatnot, because keep in mind we're not really following his character enough, so we're just assuming that he's doing law on his own end, and he's basically like talking like as if his defendant was like actually black, so he's like making fun of like the kind of defense that that certain black people will make about how you guys are going to sit here and hold this man accountable due to like the color of his skin. And of course he comes in, it's just like a regular old white guy, and everybody's like, oh shit. So I actually did kind of like admire that scene just for like the comedic balls for the God, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking exactly on the name that I was going to say, but just is it kind of the way that it tackles scene, knowing what's coming next. So it kind of like creates like a little bit of like levity there before the reveal comes, and then that's where our character finally like reveals himself. He kind of gives up the whole spiel, and he tries to make things right with like the school so that they don't try to arrest him for fraud. Tries to make things right with like the girl and things of that nature. So what did you guys think of essentially the ending for this film before we talk about the final thoughts here?
Well, I thought it dated the film when he said, Mark Watson, come on down. And immediately all I could hear is, The Price is Right,
Mm-hmm.
music popping up.
Back when Roddy was actually alive.
Bless his heart. It's interesting, though, that they had that subplot about Bradley, their frenemy. And he just, where he pops out after he's revealed himself and says, I have proof that Mark Watson is really white. And they're like, yeah, we all know that.
It shows up like just a minute late.
Yeah. But I like the fact that, I mean, the whole point was for him to evolve and see that he was in need of having to make amends. I mean, he didn't think about the consequences. That's why they put in that part about the scholarship. If they couldn't find anyone in Los Angeles, it expanded to statewide, which I didn't quite believe, but you needed to have it there. And so he was making efforts to repair the damage. So that's a positive. I mean, this is really about how he essentially grew up. So that's nice. I'd forgotten about Gordo for a long time, and the movie forgets about him too. It only comes out apparently when he's channeling Stevie Wonder as Kareem. He's doing all that weird thing.
Yeah.
Which I thought was strange. Why didn't he just lower his voice or just say a couple words real quick and excuse himself? Yeah. I thought that whole thing was like, is he blind? I mean, what is he trying to do? Blind? I mean, that didn't quite work.
But by the way, Julia Louis Dirk-Dreyfus is in this film, but she's only in it for like 2 scenes, which is why I didn't even bother like to bring her up. But yeah, that's kind of where the whole stick goes from.
Yeah, but on the whole, I like the fact that he makes amends. He goes and not just apologizes, but he also says, "Okay, well, please have this scholarship go to her so that she could pay." And then at the end, what happens? He punches out the guys who have been running through this movie making racist jokes. So it's like, yeah, it finally gets to him. I'm going, good. It should have gotten to you the very first time. You should have said something, but I can kind of understand why you didn't want to say anything. So I think the ending worked well for me.
What about you, Rob?
Well, I mean, it shows growth, and it starts one place and ends up in another. And I hate to say this but it's so true on its face that very few movies even do this anymore. They start one place, they end another. They show growth. There's an actual arc to the character. They're changed over time, and they learn something. Like it's so. I don't. I'm sure there's a reason, but there's no they don't make movies like this anymore. And even though this is just like a dime a dozen in the 80s, compare this movie to now, it would be one of the best movies to come out this year. And that's so sad. I mean, taking nothing away from Soul Man, it's a fine movie or whatever. I enjoyed watching it. But yeah, it's just so apparent that they don't make movies how they should, because they could at least be decent. They could at least have something to say.
Yeah, it is what we were talking about earlier with the film Barbarian. It's the idea of redemption. It's someone who comes to the realization that, my actions in the past were bad, and now I'm going to send my actions in the future to make amends for my past in order to become a better person. That's what we used to believe in 30, 40 years ago, that clearly if you watch modern cinema to now, we rarely believe in it anymore. The idea is that once you've done something that certain members of society believe to be bad, that you can no longer be redeemed throughout the remainder of the movie or throughout the remainder of life, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were the ones that brought up Not Okay, and that's the whole point of Not Okay is that what she did was bad, but she's going to be condemned for forever. She's always going to be tagged as this monstrous woman.
Hmm.
Here, he's not tagged as a monstrous person. He's tagged as a dumb person who did a dumb thing, but he's making amends, and he even gets the girl. And he's going to hopefully be a stepfather and also maybe have some kids himself. So yeah, it's a difference. It's a surprising difference in that the movie does not condemn him at the end. It gives him a chance to make amends, redeem himself, and he grew and he understood it. It's what James Earl Jones said, that you learned a lot just from your experience more than what I've taught you. And he replies, "No, I can always go back." They were exploring white privilege long before that concept even existed. How about that?
Mm. Yeah, it's almost as if these things have already been addressed years earlier. That you're not actually addressing new issues here, standing new grounds. Like I have a good buddy of mine. We call him the Vet, and he pretty much says that his view of modern movies is that every movie has already been made already. So people don't understand that the things that they're making today is always going to be influenced by something that has already existed. But obviously, some of our makers today think that they're so arrogant that they're creating something new and fresh that hasn't been done before. Like Billy Eichner, for example, who thinks he's making the first ever gay rom com in the history of cinema.
But that's the old saying: every story has been told.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically about how you tell it. And Hollywood,
Yeah.
I mean, literally, this goes back to their inception. Hollywood is the least original, place when there's
Yeah.
so many movies that even I'm still discovering were remakes, or and it goes back 50, 60, 70 years. They just remake the same movie over and over and over again. So, even when it's something original, it's still pieces of something else. And that takes a lot of work to put it together, and that's why we love movies when they're good. But yeah, it's very rare you get something truly original.
Well, it also depends on who remakes them. People forget that the 1956 Ten Commandments is a remake, but it was the same guy who remade it, Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah.
And Ben Hur is also a remake, but he's directing it, William Wyler. And the Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart, that's I think the second version, or the third. I think is the third
No,
version.
you're
I think
right.
there's
You're right.
yeah,
The John
there was
Huston 1941 Maltese Falcon is the second one.
the
It's
second.
not the original. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think there was a Maltese Falcon, and then there was a Satan Meets a Lady, which I have on my DVR, and it's with Betty
Okay.
Davis. And then, like I said, this movie brought back memories of Gentleman's Agreement and Some Like It Hot. They're not in that level, although Gentleman's Agreement, in my opinion, is terrible. It's a
It is.
very yes, it's a
It's a
boring.
terrible Best Picture winner. It might be the
Yeah.
worst Best Picture winner of all time.
Oh, you've never seen Cavalcade, have you?
Yes, I have. It's also terrible, but I'm just saying.
No, well, it was preachy and boring and just horrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not anything original. But it's really I think you can have remakes or you can have ideas that are not new, but it's in how you craft them. Because
Right.
who remembers Satan Meets a Lady? People remember Maltese Falcon, and sad to say, people don't remember the original Ben Hur as much as they should. Because I thought it was
It's
a
a
great film.
silent movie.
But it's still a
Stop it.
great film. It's a great film. I think that chariot scene there is better than the 59 version.
Yeah.
It's a well done, and yeah, the Ten Commandments, and then also you also have Alfred Hitchcock, who remade The Man Who Knew Too Much. Both of them, I think, are very good films. So yeah, you can have remakes, but it just depends on who's making it, what ideas are behind it. So it might not be might be anything groundbreaking or new, but it tackles things I think much better than I think some others that are about race. And I would just throw in that Billy Eichner, if he thinks Bros is the first gay rom com, wasn't Love Simon also kind of a teen rom com?
I
So
brought that
No,
up
it's
on
it's the first. It's the first gay rom com movie that's ever been made in 100 years in the history of cinema by a major studio, and we're gonna keep saying that until you actually believe it.
oh okay, so it's irrelevant to me. it's relevant to me. Depends on how good. What what slander? There was no slander. I said both of them were great. Both of them were.
And one of them was just simply better than the other.
I didn't. I never said that that either of them were bad.
The studios were at the height of their powers when they made those remakes. So of course, they production wise, there's just no comparison. If you want to celebrate those earlier versions, that's fine. But like, just the amount of craftsmanship alone was incredible. So you can like whatever. That's why I think people probably prefer those remakes.
They're better known. They're better known. But if you should give the silent Ben-Hur a chance. About the Ten Commandments, I think that doesn't. It's not as good probably because it has a modern section and biblical section, and DeMille decided to just focus on the biblical section when he remade the film. So Cassie, I don't know what you're talking about. I think both are great. I'm not bashing Ten Commandments. In fact, hopefully one day I'll have the Ten Commandments drinking game.
I don't know if you want to do a drinking game based on a biblical story. That might not go over very well. But
it's you take a shot every time someone says Moses.
Okay, so you just want people to die. I mean, you could just set that.
I mean, hey, if they ever show it in the theaters, I'm gonna have someone drive me. And I'm gonna take a shot every time someone says Moses. I don't think I'll make it to intermission, and I have low tolerance.
Please don't. I don't need the legal liability of you for watching the Ten Commandments. And unless you personally want to get closer with God, I do not recommend you do that whatsoever. So, final thoughts on this movie. I will say this. I feel like because so many people were upset by the idea of this film before they saw it, that in a lot of ways, the controversy behind the film made it a little more, let's just say, gave it more levity than if it would just came out and no one kind of talked about it in that sense. Like if it was just another more movie, it'll be a fairly fine movie, but because all the context of people like Spike Lee and the NAACP who got super butthurt about it, even though they never saw the movie whatsoever, I think gives it a little more historical relevance than it probably deserves. It's a fine movie. Like Rob was saying before, it's not the greatest movie, but it's definitely a fine movie. I think it makes its point. It doesn't, waver on too long. The characters are defined enough that they can get to the point A and point B. And like I said, there's no real drop-off period in the film. I would probably give this film about a 3.5 out of 5. And I think it's just a solid 1980s movie from a studio that no longer exists. But as we're reviewing a lot of these films, probably made some of the better movies of the 1980s that we should be watching again. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I'll let you guys go your final thoughts. I'll start with Rob.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was relatively fresh, kept me interested. I mean, it's a little cookie cutter with some of the like the 80s stuff and the plot. So I don't think it's a great movie by any means, but it's definitely worthwhile. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Just on the controversy alone, I thought it was like a ridiculous, like, almost National Lampoon style kind of movie, like raunchy or something. And it was like, no, it was a pretty tame 80s movie that has a heart, and that was funny. And I just, I enjoyed watching it. I gave it a 3 out of 5, just because I try to be as fair as possible. But yeah, it's just, it was a solid movie. No big issues. And yep, 3 out of 5.
Well, I was surprised that I thought it was much better than I thought it would be. I went into it thinking that this was going to be like I had been led to believe, that it was going to ridicule black people, and I think I was expecting just awful stereotypes.
Yeah, you bought Spike Lee's narrative before you actually watched the movie.
I bought Spike Lee's narrative. That's right. But when I went into it, and after I finished it, I thought this is a case of not seeing the forest for the trees. This movie is not ridiculing black people at all. It's actually ridiculing a lot of white people. It's ridiculing their perceptions about African Americans, and it also touches on things that I'm working on it. There was ridiculing things about how white people see them. And also, again, that whole scene about when he's driving and he's constantly worried. It's the first time that he's had to worry about how what would happen to him. Some parts I didn't like. I didn't like that bedroom far scene where all the plot, all the things had to happen at the same time. The parents came in, Whitney
Mhm.
was in there, and Sarah was also in there as well. So I thought that was just a little too much. You know, like I said, kind of a bedroom farce type
Yeah.
situation. I wasn't too thrilled with when he had to be Kareem, because again, I would have thought it's just simply like changing your voice, making it a little deeper or a little higher would have worked, and he could just walked away real quick. Um, and it has certain '80s tropes. It has, like I said, the wacky best friend and kind of the music that and the parties that you would associate with it. But I thought this was much better than its reputation, and I'm surprised that again Rotten Tomatoes has it so low. One of them did say that this is blackface, and again I would argue this is not strictly speaking blackface. So I'm going to give it probably just a 2.5 out of 5 because that whole bedroom, what I call the bedroom farce, where he
Mhm.
has to put on the ski mask and go through all of this to try to fool three people. I just thought that was a little over the top, where he has to try to balance all those things out. So it's minor points for that, but on the whole, I thought this was much better, and I think its reputation as being this kind of cartoonish anti-black film is really unfair. People should see this movie, and I think maybe the title also gave it that impression that it was supposed to be a comedy. It was to build as a comedy. Maybe they thought it was going to make fun of black people. It didn't. So it was much better than what I thought. I was surprised. So I'd give it like a 2.5 out of 5.
Okay. So I think everyone give it pretty solid reviews overall. I think, like I said, for a movie, was this new World Pictures, who have made some of the more entertaining films that we've seen like over the few years. I mean, in the last few months, I should say. It's probably the lesser of them because, like I said, we watch Heathers, we watch Tough Turf. I would say those movies are still better than this one, but I still enjoyed this one a lot in the overall. And then, like I said, a lot of the controversy behind it is like, look, if you're just bothered by just the simple act of quote unquote blackface, you're not going to look at any of the substance behind the film, then yeah, you can pretty much just say that it's a terrible movie without seeing it. People who've actually seen it, it's nowhere near as bad as a lot of people were putting out to be. And yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, people are giving the Woman King 100%, so don't always go off of Rotten Tomatoes for your film critic consensus there. So I do want to go ahead and give everyone a chance as we're winding down to promote things that you guys got coming up. So I'll go ahead and start with Rob here. So YouTube.
I posted a review today, so I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have a review posted right now on both my Letterboxd and my WordPress site, which is mottoonmovies.com, which is the movie Shrink, starring Kevin Spacey, which is one of my it's like an underrated movie. Like it's not great, but it's always kind of stuck with me, and it's a movie I like a lot. So review is up for that. I'm also going to be watching and reviewing Any Given Sunday now that it's football season. I really want to get a review out that kind of distills why that movie's so great in relation to the NFL. So that's coming out, and be back here every Monday.
All right, then, Rick, this is your time to shine.
Well,
Don't go.
I really don't have anything big. I'm just still trying to decompress from my journey. So I'll be going back to writing reviews. Really, the only thing I have big is cleaning my house and trying to catch up on everything. Likewise, but yeah, I'll be going back to reviewing more things at Rick's Texan Reviews or Rick's Cafe Texan. You can also find me that way, and just trying to learn about football. I mean, I know the rudiments of football, and someone told me, dude, when you don't use the word rudiments when you talk about football. So I will learn more about football, but honestly, it's not something that I'm big on. So uh, every week
Oh,
when we're here,
calm down there, Scott Greer. Calm down with the football talk.
foosball is the devil. All right, foosball is the devil. I got to see a lot of Waterboy too for some reason. So
Waterboy's not a bad movie. It's,
Yeah,
no,
it's a good
no,
it
movie.
still
it's
holds up.
great.
It's good.
It's great. It's great. I love it. I love Bobby Boucher. I even thought about getting a jersey, Bobby Boucher, but that's good. That's really all my spiel. I really don't have anything. Just try to catch up on things for this week.
All right, then. Now it's time to tell you what we guys got coming up here for the rest of the week. So tomorrow will be episode 15 of the Barroom Podcast. We've made it all the way to 15, and we got a lot to talk about tomorrow. Brie Larson is back, and she's desperately trying to get people to pay attention to her by creating more controversy about how trolls don't like her. Jennifer Lawrence is bitching about the fact that she got paid $25 million for a Netflix film, but Leo got $5 million more. So that's sexism, apparently. We had a lot of talk about the Little Mermaid live action remake that got 1 million dislikes on YouTube. And there's a lot of back and forth talk going about that one that we'll talk about tomorrow. I'm going to beg the question tomorrow: is She-Hulk the worst television show ever to ever exist? I'm very close to leaning on yes after watching 4 episodes. But then, of course, we'll also talk about a good television show. We'll talk about Cobra Kai in season 5 of that one tomorrow night as well. There's going to be a lot of people on there. I know Orange Hat, CS Johnson, Nerdigans are all going to join in. Maybe a few other people will jump in with us tomorrow. So should be a good conversation. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be finishing up our second part of our 2-part Die Ranger talk. So if you guys are into Power Rangers Super Sentai, you definitely want to check that one out on Wednesday night. We'll also be doing the Black Pill stream on Wednesday immediately afterwards, Abounding in the Comics. And then next Monday night, we will all be back here. We'll be talking about apparently the greatest film ever made and probably the film that's going to sweep the Academy Awards this year, The Woman King. We'll be back with our thoughts and our discussions about that film. You know it's coming, Rob. Like, you know that this one's going to get nominated for like 13 Academy Awards. So, yeah, that one is... yeah, that's gonna be a good one. And then, of course, this girl right here, Cole Classic Cage, will be on the podcast tomorrow. By the way, I think we may have one too many women on our show like tomorrow. Like, we're finally starting to build a little bit of a female contingency. But now it's gotten to a point where there's so many of you guys that it's like I don't like where this is going. We might have to.
The future is female. The future is female.
Yeah. That's what they've been told us nonstop for the last several years. So, future's female.
Meaning weak and very complainy.
Yes.
Ivy, Rob.
And when he says weak, he means physically, not mentally. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know how you could say that when we're going to see The Woman King, and you know we're going to have it's going to be a battle royale between
listen, women can do anything, and that means murdering lots of people. Hillary Clinton taught me that. Thank you.
My gosh.
I would love for us to go full clown world this year and get to a point where a movie about a bunch of black women protecting the African slave trade actually wins an Academy Award. All things considered, that would be just the icing on the cake. So.
It'll be a nice montage with 12 Years a Slave.
Mm-hmm.
There.
But
it's going to be a battle royale between The Woman King and Wakanda Forever for Best Picture. So we're going to see. But I wonder now. I don't know if The Woman King will get nominated. I don't know if it's diverse enough because this is the first year that they need those diversity quotas.
No. In Hollywood, diversity just means not white. So it's more than diverse.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So we'll see the Woman King as we're gonna have the homie versus Dora Milaje. That's gonna be the battle of the year. Yeah,
so we'll talk about that next week. We might even talk about Clerks 3 just a little bit next week as well. So until then, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I know you got like 5 minutes left in the Monday night game. Somehow the Seahawks are winning. So enjoy it. It may only be your third win of the entire season. So until then, we'll go ahead and hit the outro. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for the bar room. So good night, Rick. Good night, Rob. See you guys later.